Hello everyone, and welcome back to Terrifying Bedtime Tales. I know many of you use these videos to fall asleep, so before you drift off, I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this video. Again, starting here, the continued parts. Suggestions was to introduce a character who experienced a yatic event that mirrored a difficult period in my own past. I had written about a character struggling with a vague sense of loss, but Ethan suggested making it more specific and personal. His idea was to include an event similar to a family tragedy I had experienced years ago, something I had only hinted at in my book. It felt uncanny and invasive, but I brushed it off as a coincidence. However, as Ethan's revisions progressed, the parallels became even more disturbing. He proposed a plot twist involving a secret relationship between two characters, one that uncannily mirrored a real-life conflict I had with a close friend. The characters' motives and the fallout from their relationship seemed to reflect my own personal experiences, almost as if he had been privy to my private struggles. The resemblance was so precise that it was impossible to ignore. Things took a darker turn when Ethan suggested incorporating a subplot about a mysterious figure who stalks the protagonist. This subplot was eerie, similar to a recent unsettling experience I had a few months ago. I had begun receiving anonymous letters detailing aspects of my daily life and expressing unsettlingly accurate observations. The letters had ceased, but the memory of that invasion of privacy lingered. Ethan's suggestion felt like he was touching upon something that was still very raw and unsettling for me. Despite my growing unease, I continued working with Ethan. I was torn between the desire to make my book a success and a creeping sense that something was not right. Ethan's suggestions were undeniably compelling and improved my manuscript, but they were too close to my personal life, to the point of disturbing accuracy. One evening, after an especially unsettling phone call where Ethan's suggestions seemed to dive deep into my personal affairs, I decided to confront him. I invited him to my apartment for a discussion, hoping to address my concerns directly. I was nervous but resolute. I had to understand why his ideas seemed to mirror my life so precisely. Ethan arrived on time, carrying a leather briefcase and an air of confidence. We sat down at my dining table, surrounded by drafts and notes. I took a deep breath and broached the subject. Ethan, I need to talk about something that's been troubling me. Your suggestions, some of them, they seem eerily similar to events in my own life. It's unsettling. Ethan's face shifted from one of interest to one of concern. I assure you I didn't mean to intrude or cause any discomfort. I was just trying to make the story more compelling and relatable. But it's not just about making the story relatable, I said, my voice shaking slightly. It's about how closely your suggestions align with personal private experiences. It feels like a violation. Ethan's demeanor changed. He seemed to grow defensive. You're overreacting. As a writer, it's my job to understand the emotional depths of my characters. If some of my suggestions reflect your experiences, it's purely coincidental. My intention was to help, not to pry. I was taken aback by his response. Coincidental? How do you explain the subplot about the stalker? How do you explain your knowledge of my personal life? It's not just about the book, it's about my privacy. Ethan's eyes hardened. Sometimes the line between fiction and reality blurs. As a writer, I delve into the darkest corners of human experience. Maybe I've pushed too hard, but that's part of the process. The conversation left me feeling disoriented and conflicted. Ethan's defensiveness and rationalizations made me question the boundary between creative collaboration and personal intrusion. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that his involvement in my manuscript had become dangerously entwined with my private life. I decided to end our professional relationship. I thanked Ethan for his help, but explained that I needed to finish the book on my own terms. It was important for me to regain control over my own story, both the one I was writing and the one I was writing and the one I was living. Ethan left his expression a mix of frustration and resignation. As I sat down to revise my manuscript, I felt a profound sense of relief. I focused on the story I wanted to tell, unburdened by the unsettling reflections of my personal life. The process of writing became cathartic, allowing me to explore my characters and plot without the invasive shadows of reality. In the end, Ethan's suggestions had pushed me to confront the boundaries between fiction and reality. It was a painful lesson in maintaining control over one's own narrative, both on the page and in life, and as I continued writing, I did so with a renewed awareness of the delicate line between creative inspiration and personal privacy. Story 51. It was a normal Tuesday when I first noticed something was wrong. I had been busy all day, back-to-back meetings in a stack of reports to finish. By the evening, I was looking forward to a relaxing dinner and catching up on my favorite show. But when I pulled out my phone to check the latest news, I saw a series of notifications that made my blood run cold. My phone buzzed with new messages, not from friends or colleagues, but from my own contacts. I clicked on the first one, expecting perhaps a new social media alert or a spam message. Instead, it was a message from my friend Sarah. "Are you okay? I'm really worried. Why would you say you're in danger?" Confused, I checked the sender. It was indeed from my number. I quickly opened the next message, sent to my colleague Dave. "Please be careful. I know what happened last week. You're not safe." Each message was worse than the last. They weren't just random threats. They contained personal details about my life, things only someone close to me or someone who had been watching me would know. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. My phone had been hacked. Someone had access to my contacts and was using my number to spread alarm. I felt a surge of panic. My immediate instinct was to call Sarah and Dave to explain that I hadn't sent those messages and to reassure them. But when I tried to make the calls, I found my phone's connection disrupted. It seemed that whoever had hacked my phone had also compromised its ability to make calls. I was isolated and helpless, desperate to regain control. I managed to access my email from my laptop. I quickly began drafting messages to my contacts, explaining the situation and asking them not to respond to any suspicious messages they received from my number. But as I was typing, I noticed more strange activity. A new email had arrived in my inbox from an anonymous account containing a link. I hesitated, but curiosity and urgency got the better of me, and I clicked on it. The link led to a site filled with information about me, photos, social media posts, and more personal details. It was as though someone had compiled a dossier on my life. At the top of the page was a single line of texture: "Being watched. This is just the beginning." I was on edge. I knew I needed to act fast. I contacted my phone provider and reported the breach, but they couldn't help immediately. They promised to investigate, but it would take time. In the meantime, I tried to piece together how the breach had happened. I'd always been cautious with my phone security, using strong passwords and two-factor authentication, but clearly someone had found a way around these protections. The next few days were a blur of anxiety and confusion. I avoided using my phone whenever possible and relied on my laptop for communication. I started receiving more messages from my hack number, each one more alarming and personalized than the last. One message read, "I know where you live. You should be more careful about leaving your door unlocked." I felt constantly on edge, as if I was being watched at every turn. My home no longer felt like a sanctuary. It felt like a trap. I made sure to double-check locks and security systems, but the feeling of vulnerability was overwhelming. I reached out to the police, who took the matter seriously, but faced limitations due to the nature of the cybercrime. They advised me to be vigilant and continued documenting all suspicious activity. I also contacted a cybersecurity expert who confirmed my fears. The hacker had likely used sophisticated techniques to gain access to my phone and contacts. As days passed, I became more determined to understand who was behind this and why they were targeting me. I started looking into any recent changes or events in my life that might have led to this invasion, I retraced my steps and reviewed recent interactions, but nothing stood out as a clear motive. But one evening, while reviewing my email for any further clues, I noticed an unusual pattern in the times the messages had been sent. It seemed as though the messages were being sent at specific intervals, almost like clockwork. This realization made me think that the hacker might have been using an automated system, but with enough human intervention to ensure the messages were timely, irrelevant. I decided to set up a trap. I created a fake email address and sent a message to the anonymous account pretending to be someone else. I wrote about an imminent meeting and hinted at a significant piece of information that I would be revealing. My hope was to draw the hacker out and gather more information about their identity or motives. The response came almost immediately, but it was unexpected. The hacker replied with a single sentence, "Your curiosity will be your undoing." Fear and frustration surged through me. I was dealing with someone who was not just technically skilled, but also psychologically manipulative. Their threats were designed to destabilize me, to keep me off balance and fearful. Despite the intense anxiety, I knew I had to stay focused. I continued to work with the cybersecurity expert in the police. Eventually, we managed to trace some of the activities to a particular IP address, though it was masked and difficult to pinpoint. The whole experience was a harrowing lesson in how vulnerable we can be to digital threats. It took weeks of relentless effort to regain control of my phone and secure my digital life. I had to change all my passwords, set up new security measures, and remain vigilant against any further intrusions, even as the immediate threat began to knee. The psychological impact remained. The hackers' ability to exploit my personal information and manipulate my contacts left me with a lasting sense of unease. I learned to be more cautious and to prioritize my digital security, but the experience also made me more aware of the fragile boundary between privacy and exposure in the digital age. Story 52. It was an ordinary Tuesday when I received the letter, but it set the stage for an extraordinary and terrifying sequence of events. The envelope was stark white and unmarked save for the return address of a medical clinic. I didn't recognize its official appearance, embossed with a professional seal, immediately made my heart race. With a mixture of anxiety and curiosity, I tore it open, my fingers trembling. Slightly inside was a cover letter from the clinic addressed to me, thanking me for my recent visit. But I had never been to this clinic, nor had I ever heard of it. My pulse quickened as I turned to the next page, which contained a set of medical records that made my blood run cold. The records were alarming. They included a detailed list of conditions. I did not have diabetes, high blood pressure, and a supposed heart irregularity. Each condition was accompanied by specific treatment plans and medications. The more I read, the more disoriented I became. Not only were these conditions inaccurate, but they were also potentially life-threatening if I were to follow the recommended treatments. Confused and frightened, I checked the letter again. There was no explanation for the errors or the erroneous clinic. It seemed as though someone was trying to mislead me, but why? And how did they obtain such detailed information about my health? The first step was to contact my actual health care provider. I called them immediately, explaining the situation and asking if they had any record of a recent visit to the clinic mentioned in the letter. My doctor's office confirmed that no such visit had occurred. They assured me that my medical records were up to date and accurate, and that no information had been sent to or from the unknown clinic. With a growing sense of dread, I began to investigate the clinic listed in the letter. I searched online, but found no mention of it, no website, no reviews, not even a physical address. It was as if the clinic existed solely on that letterhead. My anxiety began to mount. What if someone had created a fake clinic just to mess with me? Determined to get to the bottom of this, I decided to visit the address provided. The location turned out to be a rundown building in a less than reputable part of town. I walked in, but The receptionist looked at me with confusion and concern when I inquired about the clinic. She informed me that there had been no medical office operating at that address for years and suggested I might have been scammed. I left the building feeling more unsettled than ever. Whoever was behind this had gone to great lengths to create a convincing illusion. My next step was to scrutinize my personal life for any signs of who might have had access to my information. As I combed through recent interactions, one name stood out: Rachel from the community group. She had been particularly inquisitive about my personal life, and her questions seemed to probe into areas unrelated to her activities. Her interest in my well-being had seemed benign at the time, but now it took on a more sinister dimension. I decided to reach out to Rachel, trying to sound casual, but with a heightened sense of alert. During our conversation, I casually mentioned the strange letter I had received. Gauging her reaction, she seemed surprised and expressed sympathy, but her demeanor was oddly neutral, almost as if she was concealing something. Or reaction, or lack thereof, convinced me that I was on the right track. I needed more concrete evidence, so I set up a meeting with a private investigator to examine the matter from a professional angle. The investigator was adept at handling cases of identity theft and personal sabotage, and he agreed to help me while waiting for the investigators' findings. I took further precautions. I installed additional security measures around my home, including new locks and a surveillance system to protect myself from any potential intruders. The investigator's report revealed something troubling. He found that the address on the letter had been used in a series of similar cases. The pattern indicated that someone was deliberately targeting individuals by sending them falsified medical information. The private investigator also uncovered that the clinic's address had been used to send out fraudulent documents before, but the source of the fraud remained elusive. I felt a knot in my stomach. The more I learned, the clearer it became that this was not just about me. Someone was orchestrating the campaign of fear and confusion, using fake medical records to undermine my trust in my own health and the systems meant to protect it. The investigation also revealed something else. Rachel's name appeared in connection with a few of these fraudulent cases. It didn't necessarily mean she was involved, but it did place her under a cloud of suspicion. I decided to confront her, but with caution. I needed to be careful not to tip off whoever might be manipulating things behind the scenes. When I confronted Rachel, she denied any wrongdoing, maintaining her innocence with a convincing facade of hurt and confusion. Her reaction was a mix of denial and shock, and she claimed to have no knowledge of the fraudulent activities, yet there was something in her eyes that made me doubt her words. It was as though she was hiding something significant. The more I dug into the matter, the more I realized that this sabotage was part of a larger, more insidious plot. Someone had taken an interest in my life, and they were willing to go to extreme lengths to manipulate me, whether it was Rachel or someone else. Entirely, the true motives were still obscured by layers of deceit as the weeks wore on. The sense of being watched and controlled only intensified. I knew that I had to remain vigilant, not just for my own safety, but to uncover the full extent of this elaborate scheme. The false medical records were a piece of a larger puzzle, and solving it required both courage and perseverance. The experience had left me shaken, but it also reinforced my resolve. I was determined to uncover the truth, no matter where it led or what dangers it entailed. The pursuit of clarity in the face of manipulation and deceit became my driving force, and I knew that the answers I saw were buried somewhere in the tangled web of lies that had ensnared my life story. Music 53. It was an ordinary Tuesday when I decided to explore the abandoned warehouse on the edge of town. I'd driven past it countless times, its dilapidated exterior a stark contrast to the bustling city around it. But that day, a curiosity I couldn't quite explain nudged me to finally investigate. The warehouse loomed like a forgotten sentinel, its brick facade crumbling and graffiti clad the large Steel doors were rusted shut, but a small side entrance was ajar, inviting me into the darkness. Within, I hesitated for a moment, the rational part of me warning that this might not be the safest idea, but the sense of curiosity and intrigue overpowered my hesitation. Stepping inside, I was greeted by the musty odor of decay and neglect. The air was thick with dust, and the dim light filtering through the dirty windows created an eerie, almost surreal atmosphere. I turned on my flashlight, its beam cutting through the gloom and revealing a vast cavernous space filled with towering stacks of old crates and broken furniture. I moved cautiously, my footsteps echoing in the cavernous expanse. The warehouse had clearly been abandoned, for years old machinery lay scattered around, and the remnants of what had once been a busy workspace were now covered in a layer of grime. As I ventured deeper into the warehouse, I came across a section that seemed oddly organized compared to the rest of the space. Shell lined the walls, cluttered with an assortment of objects. It was here that I began to notice something unsettling. Many of the items looked strikingly familiar. The first item that caught my attention was an old leather notebook. It was unmistakably mine. I had lost it months ago, along with a collection of sketches and notes I had been working on. I picked it up with trembling hands, flipping through its pages to find my own handwriting. Each entry was just as I had left it, as if the notebook had been stolen and carefully preserved. Nearby, I spotted a weathered wooden box. Opening it, I discovered a collection of personal items, a watch that had gone missing years ago, a silver locket with a photo of my grandmother, and a set of keys I had long since given up on finding. Each item was neatly arranged, as though someone had taken great care to collect them. The more I explored, the more unsettling the warehouse became. It seemed that someone had been meticulously gathering lost or misplaced objects that belonged to me. I found an old pair of glasses with a scratch on the lens, glasses I had replaced only recently, in a faded photograph of my childhood home, one I had thought was lost forever. But it wasn't just physical objects. As I dug deeper, I discovered a stack of old journals, each one detailing moments of my life. The entries were in a style that was both familiar and strange, reflecting experiences and thoughts that matched my own. Some of the journals were even marked with dates and events that corresponded precisely with my life. The realization that someone had been tracking and documenting my experiences was deeply disturbing. There were also personal notes scattered among the items. They were written in a hand that was not mine, but bore a meticulous attention to detail. The notes described my daily routines, my likes and dislikes, and even my personal struggles. It was as though someone had been observing and recording every aspect of my life, compiling a comprehensive dossier on me. My heart pounded as I continued to sift through the contents. I felt a growing sense of unease, as though I was intruding on a dark secret. The warehouse seemed to pulse with a silent energy, the objects and notes weaving together a narrative that was both intimate and invasive. Among the scattered papers, I found a large dusty binder. It was labeled with my name and had a faded photograph of me on the cover. Opening it, I found a detailed blog of events and experiences from my life. Each entry was meticulously dated and described in vivid detail. There were notes about my friends, my family, and even private moments I had never shared with anyone. The final pages of the binder contained something more troubling. They were filled with handwritten observations and cryptic messages. The writer seemed to be grappling with their own sense of purpose and identity, questioning their motives and the ethics of their actions. The tone was one of obsessive curiosity, hinting at a deeper, more unsettling connection between the writer and myself. My mind raced as I pieced together the implications. Who could have done this? Why would someone be so interested in collecting and documenting my personal belongings and experiences? The meticulous nature of the collection suggested a level of obsession that was both unnerving and bewildering. As I stood among the amassed items, a sudden noise from the far corner of the warehouse made me jump. It was a faint rustling, like someone or something was moving around. I turned flashlight, beam slicing through the shadows, but saw nothing out of the ordinary. With a growing sense of urgency, I decided it was time to leave the warehouse. Once a place of curiosity had become a chilling repository of my own life, a space that felt increasingly like a trap. I quickly gathered my belongings and made my way back to the exit, my heart racing with fear and confusion. As I stepped back into the daylight, the world outside felt oddly normal, almost surreal, in contrast to the darkness I had just left behind. The warehouse loomed behind me, its secrets now a part of me, a haunting reminder of a connection I didn't fully understand. The experience left me with more questions than answers. Why had someone been collecting my belongings? What did it mean? And most importantly, who was behind this disturbing collection? The warehouse had revealed shadowy link to my own life, one that I couldn't ignore, and that would linger in my thoughts long after I had left its confines. Story 54. It was a crisp autumn afternoon when the knock on my door came, shattering the calm of my routine. I opened it to find two uniformed officers standing on my doorstep, their expressions grim. They informed me that I was being charged with theft, a crime I knew I hadn't committed. My initial reaction was disbelief. I had always lived a quiet, law-abiding life. As they handed me the summons, I noticed the details of the alleged crime, a break-in at a local business with evidence pointing directly to me. The shock of the accusation turned into confusion. As I reviewed the case against me, the evidence was damning. Fingerprints on the scene, surveillance footage showing a person with a striking resemblance to me, and even a witness who claimed to have seen me near the crime location. The more I looked into it, the clearer it became that this was no mere coincidence. Someone had gone to great lengths to frame me. I hired a lawyer, an experienced defense attorney named Sarah, who assured me that we would uncover the truth. We started by examining the evidence. The fingerprints were particularly troubling, as they seemed to match mine almost too perfectly. Sarah suggested that we request the raw footage from the surveillance cameras to scrutinize the timestamps and image quality. The footage showed a figure with a similar build and clothing, but the face was obscured. The more we analyzed it, the more apparent it became that this footage had been tampered with. Sarah and I decided to revisit the crime scene to look for any inconsistencies or overlooked details. The business, a small electronics store, had been broken into through a rear window. The police report mentioned a struggle with various items scattered around. As we investigated, I noticed something peculiar, a small set of footprints leading away from the window, which seemed too deliberate and placed with intent. With Sarah's help, we investigated the business's neighboring properties and found that the alleyway behind the store was frequently used by delivery trucks. It dawned on us that these footprints could have been part of a setup. We also spoke to the witness, a clerk from a nearby store who had identified me. However, his description was vague and inconsistent with the time of the alleged crime. We learned that he had been having trouble with his vision and had a history of misidentifying people. The more we dug, the more we uncovered unsettling truths. The witness turned out to have a personal grudge against me stemming from a minor dispute months prior. Additionally, we discovered that the store's security system had been recently upgraded and the footage was not as clear as it should have been. The idea of a conspiracy began to take shape, and the sense of being manipulated became inescapable. A breakthrough came when Sarah discovered a connection between the store owner and a local criminal who had a history of orchestrating elaborate schemes. This criminal, known for his involvement in various illegal activities, had recently been seen with someone who resembled me. We traced the criminal's recent activities and found evidence that he had been in the area during the time of the crime, raising the possibility that he was behind the frame. Our investigation revealed a disturbing pattern. The store owner had been under financial pressure and had apparently collaborated with the criminal to stage the break-in. The plan was to divert attention From the store's financial mismanagement by pinning the crime on someone else, my name had been chosen at random, and the evidence fabricated to fit the narrative with this new information. Sarah and I went back to the authorities. We presented our findings, including the evidence of the setup and the connection between the store owner and the criminal. Initially, the police were skeptical, but as we provided more evidence, including testimonies from the criminal's associates who corroborated our claims, they began to take us seriously. The process of clearing my name was grueling. I was forced to attend several court hearings, each one a reminder of the nightmare I had been dragged into. But as the truth came to light, the false accusations began to crumble. The store owner and the criminal were both arrested, and the fabricated evidence was discredited. Throughout the ordeal, I felt like a pawn in a twisted game, manipulated and used for someone else's gain. The sense of violation and betrayal was profound. The legal system eventually exonerated me, but the scars of the experience lingered. It was not just about the crime I hadn't committed, but about the realization that there were people willing to destroy lives for their own benefit. Despite the resolution, the experience left me wary and distrustful. The ordeal had shown me how easily someone's life could be turned upside down by the machinations of others. The fight to clear my name had been exhausting, but it had also made me more resilient. I learned to value the truth above all else and to approach each day with the cautious but determined music optimism. In the end, I reclaimed my life. But the shadows of that dark period remained. The case had been a stark reminder of the fragility of justice and the importance of vigilance in the face of deception. The people who had orchestrated my frame-up were brought to justice, but their actions had left a lasting impact, reminding me that sometimes the darkest corners of our lives are illuminated by the harshest of truths. Story 55. The first puzzle piece arrived on a Tuesday morning, nestled among the usual stack of bills and junk mail. I almost missed it, but the edge of the envelope peeked out from behind a stack of catalogs. It was a small, nondescript envelope lacking any return address, with only my name scrolled in neat handwriting. Inside was a single puzzle piece with a jagged edge and a photograph of what looked like an old, weather-beaten house. The house was partially obscured by overgrown vines and trees, and the scene felt oddly familiar, though I couldn't place why. The back of the piece had a cryptic message written in fine, almost calligraphic ink. You remember this, but you remember why. My curiosity was piqued, but quickly overshadowed by the mundane duties of the day. I set the piece aside, dismissing it as some bizarre prank. It wasn't until the next day that another envelope arrived, this one containing a second puzzle piece. This one showed a close-up of a desk cluttered with what appeared to be old papers and photographs. There was a handwritten note on the back. Piece by piece, you'll remember. The pattern continued over the following weeks, one piece of the puzzle arriving almost daily. Each piece depicted fragments of a larger image of cluttered room, a faded family portrait, an old leather-bound book. Each new piece increased my growing unease, as the images seemed to hint at a part of my life I couldn't remember or understand. By the end of the month, I had accumulated nearly 24 pieces. I began assembling them on my dining room table, trying to piece together the strange mosaic that was emerging as the puzzle came together. The image began to take shape. It was a dark, disheveled study with an ornate desk cluttered with documents and strange objects. A picture of a family hung crookedly on the wall, and an old book lay open with an unfamiliar, eerie inscription visible despite the unsettling nature of the image. The puzzle pieces themselves provided little insight into the meaning behind them. There was no return address on the envelopes and no clues in the notes. I was haunted by the strange sense of familiarity, coupled with the nagging realization that something crucial was being withheld from me. In the middle of the puzzle assembly, I received a final envelope. Inside was the last piece of the puzzle and a letter. The letter was typed and signed Anonymously, you've done, well now you must. Understand, this puzzle reveals a chapter of your life that you've tried to forget. The truth is not always comfortable, but it is necessary. The house in the puzzle belonged to someone close to you, someone who disappeared from your life under strange circumstances. It's time you remembered the answer lies in the old book depicted in the image. Find it, and you will uncover the truth. The letter left me in a state of confusion and dread. I racked my brain, trying to recall any missing chapters from my past. The house in the image looked like it could be from a neighborhood I once knew, and the desk filled with papers and photographs seemed like something out of a story I had forgotten. That night, I decided to visit my parents, hoping they might have some insight into these strange occurrences. I broached the subject with them, delicately showing them the puzzle pieces and asking if they recognized the house or any of the items in the image. Their faces turned pale as they studied the pieces. That house, it's in your Aunt Margaret's old neighborhood, my mother finally said, her voice trembling. She lived there before she vanished. I was stunned. Aunt Margaret had disappeared years ago, leaving no trace and no explanation. I had always been told she moved away and had chosen to sever ties with the family, but the details of her departure were murky and inconsistent. I had never given it much thought, assuming it was a personal choice or perhaps a fallout from family disputes. The book, my father said, pointing at the open book in the puzzle image. Margaret had a collection of old books. I remember seeing one just like that at her place. It was rumored to be valuable and filled with old family secrets. The debt to find answers. I decided to visit the old house that matched the one in the puzzle. It was now a dilapidated structure on the edge of town, overgrown with ivy and clearly abandoned. With a growing sense of trepidation, I made my way inside. The interior was as I'd seen in the puzzle: dust-covered furniture, old photographs, and stacks of documents. I found the desk from the image, and to my astonishment, the old book was still there, nestled among other forgotten items. The book was bound in cracked leather, and the inscription was indeed unsettling, an account of family secrets and hidden truths written in a language that seemed both archaic and personal. As I carefully leafed through the pages, I discovered a handwritten section detailing a dark family secret, a history of illicit activities, betrayals, and hidden identities. Aunt Margaret had been deeply involved in these activities, and her disappearance was a result of an internal power struggle. The book was a record of her attempts to protect herself and her family by documenting the truth. The revelations were shattering. The puzzle pieces, once mere fragments of a disturbing image, had led me to uncover a hidden and uncomfortable truth about my family. Aunt Margaret had not simply left as she had vanished to escape a dangerous past that had been intricately tied to our own. As I left the house, the puzzle pieces now seemed like fragments of a forgotten history that had been forced into the light. The eerie truth uncovered was unsettling, but also liberating. It explained the mysteries and gaps in my family's past, and it was a stark reminder that some truths, no matter how disturbing, need to be faced in order to understand the present. Story 56. The late afternoon sun was casting long shadows across my doorstep as I arrived home from work. It had been an exhausting day, filled with back-to-back meetings and deadlines that seemed to stretch endlessly. As I fumbled for my keys, my eyes fell upon a plain, unmarked package lying on the doormat. Its presence was unusual. I hadn't ordered anything recently and wasn't expecting any deliveries. The package was small, wrapped in brown paper, and had no return address or sender information. My heart skipped a beat as I picked it up, the weight of the unknown making my palms sweat. I tried to calm my racing thoughts, telling myself it was probably a mis-delivered item or a package meant for a neighbor, but something about the package's mysterious arrival unsettled me, igniting a gnawing sense of unease. Inside the package contained a single letter. The envelope was unadorned, and the letter within was written on plain white paper. As I unfolded it, my hands trembled slightly. The letter was typed with each word carefully chosen and arranged in a methodical manner. I began to read, my eyes scanning the words that seemed to grow darker with every line. Dear, you don't know me, but I know you very well. Over the past few months, I have been observing you closely, documenting your every move, what you see as private moments, what you believe to be your own personal space is anything but secure. You may have thought you were safe, but I have made sure that your most intimate and private moments have been captured, from your quiet evenings alone to the moments you believed were hidden from the world. I have been there, watching, recording, and storing away the details of your life. I have become quite adept at infiltrating your life if unnoticed. Every routine you follow, every secret you keep has been noted and preserved. The photographs and videos you discovered in the hidden room were only a small part of what I have collected. They are a reminder of the lengths I am willing to go to ensure compliance. Now you are at a crossroads. You can choose to ignore this message, but be warned, doing so will lead to the exposure of your most private and compromising moments. These will be made public, and the details of your life will be laid bare for all to see. Your reputation, your privacy, and everything you hold dear will be at stake. Alternatively, you have the opportunity to make a choice. I have certain demands that must be met for you to protect yourself and keep your life from unraveling. You will find these demands enclosed with this letter. Failure to comply will result in the exposure of the information I possess. This is your chance to take control and safeguard your privacy. Do not mistake this as an idle threat. I have the means and the willingness to follow through on my promises. The choice is yours. Comply with my demands, and you can continue to live your life with a semblance of privacy. Ignore them and face the consequences. Sincerely, the observer. My hands shook as I finished reading the letter. The message was clear, and its implications were terrifying. Someone had been watching me, gathering incriminating evidence, and now they were using that information to coax me into submission. The letter wasn't just a threat, it was a calculated move to instill fear and manipulate me into compliance. I quickly glanced through the envelope's contents, finding a second sheet tucked inside. It was a list of demands written in the same precise typeface. The demands were specific and unsettling. 1. Transfer a sum of money to an offshore account. 2. Provide access to your personal computer and digital files. 3. Meet with a representative of mine at a designated location. The demands were absurd and invasive. They required financial sacrifice, a breach of my digital privacy, and a face-to-face meeting with an unknown individual. I felt a surge of panic and helplessness. This was not just about money, it was about control and coercion. The letter and demands left me feeling cornered. I had to make a decision, but my mind was clouded with fear and confusion. The thought of having my private moments exposed was unbearable, but complying with the demands felt like surrendering control over my life. I needed to act quickly, but cautiously. I decided to contact the authorities immediately. I gathered the letter, the list of demands, and the package, and then dialed 911. The police arrived within the hour, and I handed over the evidence, explaining everything that had happened, including the hidden room and the disturbing contents I had found. The officers took the package and letter for analysis, and they assured me that they would investigate the situation thoroughly. They advised me to avoid complying with the demands and to take precautions for my safety. Their reassurance was somewhat comforting, but the anxiety of being watched and threatened persisted. As the days passed, I felt a constant sense of dread. The knowledge that someone had been so intimately involved in my life, observing and documenting my every move, left me feeling exposed and vulnerable. I took measures to secure my home, upgraded my security system, and remained vigilant. But the fear of the unknown lingered when the investigation into the threats and the identity of the perpetrator was ongoing, but the results were slow to materialize. The lack of concrete leads in the sophistication of the intrusion made the case challenging each day, brought a mix of hope and despair, and the weight of the situation seemed to grow heavier despite the fear and uncertainty. I tried to reclaim some semblance of normally. I continued with my daily routines, though they were now tinged with a sense of paranoia. The letters, threats had upended my life, but I resolved to face the situation with as much courage as I could muster. In the end, the package had been a catalyst for a painful revelation, the realization that my sense of privacy and security had been irrevocably breached. The shadows of surveillance and manipulation cast a long, dark shadow over my life, but I was determined to fight back and protect whatever was left of my dignity and freedom. Story 57. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly. I was scrolling through my social media feed on a quiet Sunday morning when I stumbled upon a post that caught my eye. It was a long, detailed accusation about a local individual, someone who, to my horror, was me. The post described heinous acts in such detail that it was almost impossible to ignore. My initial reaction was disbelief. Surely this was some sort of mistake or a cruel prank. But as I read further, the level of detail in the accusations made my stomach churn. The post included specific incidents from my life, places I had been, and even intimate details that only someone close to me would know. The anonymity of the post did nothing to quell the rising panic. It was as if someone had delved into the deepest corners of my life and pulled out every secret they could find, weaving them into a disturbing narrative. I frantically scrolled through the comments. There was a flurry of responses, some supportive, but many were vicious and condemning. The more I read, the more I realized the damage was spreading. Friends, colleagues, and acquaintances were all seeing the post, and it was rapidly gaining traction. I felt a wave of nausea and disbelief. This was not just an attack on my character, it was an assault on my very existence. I had to act quickly to mitigate the damage, but the questions swirling in my mind were overwhelming. Who could be behind this? What did they hope to achieve? I decided to take immediate action. The first step was to address the situation head on. I composed a detailed, heartfelt response to the accusations, addressing each point with clarity and honesty. I emphasized that the allegations were false and that I was committed to cooperating with any investigation that would clear my name. I posted this response on my social media accounts and reached out to the platform administrators to report the defamatory content. Despite my efforts, the post continued to circulate. The more I tried to defend myself, the more I seemed to be drawn into the quicksand of public scrutiny. The accusations were detailed and frighteningly accurate, which made it difficult for people to simply dismiss them as baseless. The nature of the claims made me question if there was some hidden truth behind them, or if they were purely the result of someone's malicious intent. The next few days were a blur of anxiety and frustration. I contacted a lawyer to explore legal options. The lawyer advised me to gather evidence that could refute the claims and to continue cooperating with the authorities. I compiled all relevant documents, messages, and alibis that could demonstrate my innocence. The emotional toll was immense, and I struggled to maintain my composure as the days dragged on. In parallel, I tried to piece together who could be behind this. I reviewed recent interactions and relationships, searching for any signs of hostility or resentment. I was especially cautious of people who had been in my inner circle, as the accuracy of the accusations suggested insider knowledge. Every encounter, every conversation was scrutinized for music clues. As I delved deeper into my personal relationships, I began to notice subtle changes in the behavior of a few individuals. One friend in particular had seemed increasingly distant and evasive. We had had a recent falling out, which I had dismissed as a simple disagreement, but now it seemed significant in a way I hadn't anticipated. I decided to confront this friend. The conversation was uncomfortable and tense. I expressed my concerns and laid out the evidence that led me to suspect them. They vehemently denied any involvement, and their Distress seemed genuine, they offered support, and even helped me gather more evidence to refute. The accusations, still their reaction, left me conflicted. Was this a genuine plea for understanding? Or was it an elaborate facade? The days turned into weeks and the investigation continued. The authorities were able to trace the source of the anonymous posts to a series of encrypted accounts, but they found no direct link to anyone specific. The process of uncovering the truth was slow and arduous, and the lack of clear answers only fueled my anxiety. Eventually, I received a break through an anonymous tip led the authorities to a hidden cache of digital records. The records contained logs of conversations and detailed plans about the smear campaign. The details were shocking. The plan was meticulously orchestrated with multiple individuals involved. The investigation revealed that a disgruntled former employee, someone I had previously trusted, had orchestrated the entire campaign. Their motive was rooted in a mix of jealousy, resentment, and a desire for revenge. The revelation was a bitter pill to swallow. It was a reminder of how trust could be weaponized and how the people closest to us could harbor deep-seated animosities. The process of clearing my name was grueling, but the truth ultimately prevailed. The false accusations were retracted, and the responsible individuals faced legal consequences. The aftermath of the ordeal was both liberating and traumatic. My mind